The morning I found the bright orange violation notice on my garage door, I was carrying a 50-pound bag of ice melt from my truck, and I nearly dropped it on my foot. My name is Jason Zimmerman, and I had lived in the Meadowbrook Heights subdivision in Columbus, Ohio, for exactly 3 years. 3 years of relatively peaceful existence in a community that prided itself on manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, and apparently the most aggressive homeowners association this side of the Mississippi. I pulled the paper off my garage door and read it twice, certain I was misunderstanding something fundamental about the English language. Violation notice. Unauthorized commercial activity. Dear resident, it has come to our attention that you are storing excessive quantities of commercial materials in your garage visible to the street. This constitutes a violation of HOA Covenant Section 12.4.7, which prohibits home-based businesses without prior approval. Fine assessed, $500. Please remedy immediately or face additional penalties. I stood there in my driveway, still holding the bag of ice melt, feeling my blood pressure rise. Commercial activity. I bought ice melt in bulk every winter and sold it at cost to my neighbors. At cost. I was not making a single penny. In fact, I usually lost money when I factored in the gas I used driving to the wholesaler in Cincinnati. It was January 15th, and Columbus was experiencing one of its nastier winters. We had gotten 12 inches of snow the week before, and the temperatures had not climbed above 20 degrees in days. The city was a skating rink. Every hardware store within a 20-mile radius had been sold out of ice melt for weeks, so I did what any reasonable person would do. I drove 2 hours to a wholesaler, bought 20 bags at $15 each, and offered them to anyone in the neighborhood who needed them for exactly $15. I looked at my garage. The door was partially open because I had been unloading. Inside, neatly stacked along one wall, were about 15 remaining bags of ice melt. Hardly excessive. Hardly commercial. I marched into my house, violation notice crumpling in my fist, and immediately called the HOA office number listed at the bottom of the page. Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association. This is Brenda speaking. Hi, Brenda. This is Jason Zimmerman from 847 Willow Creek Drive. I just got a violation notice about storing ice melt in my garage, and I think there has been a serious misunderstanding. Hold, please. The line clicked before I could respond. I waited and waited. After 5 minutes of hold music that sounded like it was recorded in 1987, a different voice came on the line. This is Patricia Hendricks, HOA President. I understand you are calling about your violation, Patricia Hendricks. I had met her exactly once at a neighborhood barbecue 2 summers ago. She was a woman in her late 40s with the kind of haircut that demanded to speak to managers everywhere she went. She had spent the entire barbecue complaining about someone's fence being half an inch too tall and another neighbor's holiday decorations being up 2 days past the approved date. Yes, Patricia. I got this notice about commercial activity, but I am not running a business. I just help out neighbors with ice melt when the stores are sold out. Mr. Zimmerman, our records show that multiple residents have given you money in exchange for products stored on your property. That is the definition of commerce. I am selling it at cost. I do not make any profit. I am just trying to help people not break their necks on their driveways. The covenant is very clear. No home-based businesses without approval. You did not seek approval. The fine stands. You have 30 days to pay and cease all commercial operations. This is ridiculous. It is not a business if there is no profit. That is not for you to determine. The board has made its decision. Have a good day, Mr. Zimmerman. She hung up. Actually hung up on me. I stared at my phone, genuinely shocked. In my entire adult life, I had never encountered someone so deliberately obtuse. I was helping people. The elderly couple 3 doors down, the Martins, could not drive in this weather. The single mom across the street, Jennifer, was working 2 jobs and did not have time to hunt for ice melt. The retired veteran next door had a bad back and could not lift heavy bags even if he found them. But apparently, Patricia Hendricks and her HOA board did not care about any of that. My wife, Amanda, came down the stairs as I was pacing circles in the kitchen. She worked as a nurse at Ohio State University Medical Center and had just gotten home from a night shift. "What is wrong?" she asked, immediately reading my expression. I handed her the violation notice. She read it, her tired eyes widening. $500 for helping neighbors. Apparently, I am running an unauthorized business. That is insane. Can they even do this? According to our HOA covenants, apparently yes. I signed those documents when we bought the house. I just never imagined anyone would interpret helping neighbors as commercial activity. Amanda sat down at the kitchen table, still wearing her scrubs. "So what are you going to do?" I looked out the window at my garage, at the bags of ice melt I had driven 4 hours round trip to get, at the list of neighbors on my refrigerator who still needed to pick up their orders. "I am going to stop," I said quietly. "I am going to tell everyone I cannot help them anymore, and then I am going to watch this neighborhood figure out how to handle ice on their own." Amanda knew me well enough to hear the anger in my voice. "You are going to be petty about this." "Yes, I am." She was too tired to argue. "Just do not do anything that will get us in more trouble." That afternoon, I started making calls. First was old Mr. Martin from 3 houses down. He was 83 and his wife was 81. "Hello." "Hi, Mr. Martin. It is Jason from down the street." "Oh, Jason. Good timing. Mary and I were just talking about when we could pick up that ice melt. Our front steps are getting dangerous." This was the part I hated. "I am really sorry, Mr. Martin, but I cannot sell you the ice melt. The HOA has fined me for storing it and called it commercial activity. I have to stop." Silence on the other end. Then, they did what? "They say I am running a business without approval. $500 fine. I have to stop immediately. But the stores are all sold out." "We have looked everywhere." "I know, I am sorry, I really am." After I hung up, I felt physically sick, but I kept calling. Jennifer, the single mom, the Petersons who both worked long hours, the Changs who had just moved in last month, the Rodriguezes who had 3 small children and could not risk icy walkways. Every call was the same. Shock, disbelief, and then the dawning realization that they were on their own. By the time I finished, word was already spreading through the neighborhood. My phone started ringing. Texts came in. Everyone wanted to know if it was true, if I was really stopping. One text came from Tom Chen, who lived 4 houses down and worked in software development. "Is this about Patricia Hendricks? She has been on a power trip lately. She tried to fine me for parking my car on the street overnight when I had contractors working on my garage." Another text from Sarah Rodriguez. "Patricia gave us a violation last month because our trash can was visible from the street on a non-trash day. It had blown over in the wind." These people are unbelievable. I was starting to see a pattern. That evening, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Mr. Martin standing there, bundled in a heavy coat despite the cold that must have been painful for him. "Mr. Martin, you should not be out in this weather. I wanted to give you this." He handed me an envelope. "It is a letter to the HOA board. Mary and I both signed it. We are requesting they reverse your fine and let you keep helping neighbors." I was genuinely touched. "You did not have to do this." "Yes, we did. What they are doing is wrong. We have lived in this neighborhood for 30 years, long before this HOA got so power hungry. Patricia Hendricks has been looking for ways to fine people and flex her authority ever since she became president 2 years ago. It is shameful. After he left, carefully navigating my salted walkway, I opened the envelope and read the letter. It was beautifully written, explaining how my help was essential for elderly and vulnerable residents, how I was not making money, how the HOA was overreaching. The next morning, 3 more letters appeared in my mailbox, all addressed to the HOA. Neighbors were rallying, but I knew Patricia well enough by now to know it would not matter. I was right. 2 days later, I received a response from the HOA board. Thank you for your input. After careful consideration, the board has determined that the fine was appropriately assessed according to our governing documents. The decision stands. That same day, the temperature dropped to 15 degrees. The snowplows had created ice ridges at the end of every driveway that were like concrete. The weatherman was calling for another storm that weekend, and the hardware stores were still sold out of ice melt. I sat in my garage, looking at the remaining bags of ice melt stacked against the wall. 15 bags. Each one could help a family, an elderly couple, a struggling parent, but my hands were tied, or so I thought. That afternoon, Tom Chen called me. Jason, you should know that Patricia Hendricks has been telling people at the community center that you were running an illegal business and she shut you down. She is making it sound like you were profiteering off desperate neighbors. What? Yeah. I was there for the senior yoga class my mom attends. Patricia was holding court with some other board members, talking about how she had to crack down on commercial activity in the neighborhood. Your name came up. She made it sound like you were some kind of scam artist. Now I was not just angry. I was furious. I went back through my records. Every transaction, every neighbor I had helped, every receipt from the wholesaler. I had been meticulous because I worked in accounting, and that was just how my brain functioned. I had spreadsheets showing exactly what I paid per bag and exactly what I charged. Zero profit margin. In fact, when I factored in gas, I had lost about $60 overall. I compiled everything into a folder and wrote a detailed letter explaining the situation. Then I did something I probably should have done earlier. I posted about it on the neighborhood Facebook group. Hi neighbors. Many of you know I have been helping people get ice melt this winter. I want you to know that I have been ordered by the HOA to stop and have been fined $500. I was not making any profit. I just wanted to help. I am sorry to those I cannot help anymore. Please be safe out there. I attached copies of my receipts and spreadsheet, proof that I was not profiteering. The response was immediate and explosive. Within an hour, there were over 100 comments. People were outraged. Some shared their own stories of unreasonable HOA fines. Others questioned Patricia Hendricks' leadership. Several people pointed out that the HOA had spent thousands of dollars on decorative entrance signs last year, but could not organize bulk ice melt purchasing for residents. That evening, my doorbell did not stop ringing. Neighbors came by to express their support. Someone started a petition to recall Patricia Hendricks from the board. By midnight, it had 70 signatures, but Patricia was not backing down. The next morning, I received another notice. This one threatened additional daily fines if I did not remove the ice melt from my garage within 48 hours. Failure to comply will result in fines of $100 per day until the violation is remedied. This was getting out of hand. I called a lawyer that afternoon. His name was David Martinez, and he specialized in HOA disputes. His office was in downtown Columbus. Mr. Zimmerman, I have reviewed the documents you sent, he said during our phone consultation. The HOA is technically within their rights according to your covenants, but they are being extremely aggressive in their interpretation. The question is whether you want to fight this legally. How much would that cost? Retainer of $3,000 to start. HOA litigation can get expensive quickly. I did not have $3,000 to throw at a legal fight over ice melt. Neither did most of my neighbors who were supporting me. What if I just comply? I asked. Then you pay the fine, remove the ice melt, and move on. But Mr. Zimmerman, I have to tell you, HOAs like this do not stop. If they have this much power and this little oversight, they will keep finding things to fine people for. You might not be their last target. He was right, but I still did not have $3,000. That weekend, the predicted snowstorm hit. 8 more inches fell on Saturday night. Sunday morning, the neighborhood was buried, and the temperature stayed below freezing, meaning all that snow quickly turned to ice underneath. I watched from my window as neighbors struggled. The Martins could not get their car out of their driveway. Jennifer was chipping away at ice with a metal shovel which was going to take her hours. The Petersons had given up and called into work. I still had 15 bags of ice melt in my garage, but I could not help. It was torture. Monday morning, I got another notice from the HOA. The 48 hours had passed, and technically I had not removed all the ice melt. I had used a few bags on my own driveway and walkway, but the rest were still there. Additional fine assessed, $100 per day until violation is remedied. Current total fines, $700. I called Patricia Hendricks directly this time, using the personal number she had included on this latest notice. Mr. Zimmerman, you were warned. Patricia, this is insane. It is ice melt. I am not running a drug operation. The rules exist for a reason. If we let one person break them, everyone will. I was helping people. You were conducting business without approval. Now you are facing the consequences. I suggest you remove those materials immediately before your fines reach a point where we place a lien on your property. A lien. Unpaid HOA fines can result in a lien against your home, Mr. Zimmerman. Eventually, we can even force a sale. I suggest you take this seriously. She hung up again. I sat there, phone in hand, realizing that this had escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. Over ice melt. Over helping neighbors. That evening, there was an emergency meeting of the HOA board. Several neighbors had demanded it, using a provision in the bylaws that allowed residents to call meetings with sufficient petition signatures. The meeting was held at the Meadowbrook Heights Community Center, a small building near the neighborhood entrance. I attended, along with at least 50 other residents. The room was packed. Patricia Hendricks sat at a table in front with 3 other board members. Ronald Pritchard, the vice president, a thin man in his 60s who looked like he had never disagreed with anyone in his life. Deborah Wu, the treasurer, who kept her eyes down the entire meeting, and Carl Murphy, the secretary, who seemed genuinely uncomfortable with the whole situation. Patricia called the meeting to order. We are here because some residents have questions about recent enforcement actions. I want to be clear that the board takes its responsibilities seriously and enforces our covenants fairly and consistently. Tom Chen stood up immediately. With all due respect, Patricia, there is nothing fair about fining a man $500 for helping his neighbors. Applause broke out. Patricia's face tightened. Mr. Chen, the covenant clearly states. We know what it states, Sarah Rodriguez interrupted, standing up. But it also requires the board to act in good faith. Interpreting helping neighbors as commercial activity is not good faith. It is a power trip. More applause. Patricia banged a gavel on the table. Order. I will have order. Mr. Martin slowly stood up, which quieted the room out of respect. I have lived in this neighborhood for 30 years. I remember when we formed this HOA, and I voted for it because I thought it would protect property values and help our community. But this is not what I voted for. Jason Zimmerman is a good man helping people, and you are punishing him for it. You should be ashamed. The room erupted in agreement. Patricia was visibly angry now. If you do not like how the board operates, you can vote us out at the annual election in March. Until then, we enforce the rules as written. Mr. Zimmerman violated the covenant. He has been fined. End of discussion. I am not paying the fines, I said, surprised by my own voice. I stood up. I am not paying them because they are unjust. If you want to put a lien on my house over ice melt, go ahead, but I am not paying. The room went quiet. Patricia looked at me with barely contained fury. That is your choice, Mr. Zimmerman, but there will be consequences. The meeting dissolved into chaos after that, with neighbors arguing and Patricia trying to maintain control. Eventually, she simply declared the meeting over and walked out. Over the next week, things got worse before they got better. The daily fines kept accumulating, $100 per day. By Friday, I supposedly owed $1,700 in HOA fines, but something else was happening too. Neighbors were organizing. The petition to recall Patricia and the other board members gained over 100 signatures. People started attending every board meeting, asking pointed questions about finances, about decision-making processes, about other enforcement actions. Tom Chen, who had a background in data analysis, started digging into HOA records. What he found was disturbing. He called me on a Tuesday evening. "Jason, you need to see this. Can I come over?" 20 minutes later, Tom was at my kitchen table with his laptop open. I requested financial records from the HOA under the disclosure provisions in our bylaws. Took them 3 weeks, but they finally sent them. Look at this. He showed me a spreadsheet of expenses. Last year, the HOA collected about $90,000 in annual dues from residents. Want to guess where a lot of that money went? I looked at the numbers. There were several large payments to something called Hendricks Consulting Services. That is Patricia's company, Tom said. She has been paying herself $20,000 a year for management consulting for the HOA. Is that legal? Technically, yes, if the board approves it. But look at who is on the board. Ronald Pritchard is her brother-in-law. They approved this payment without telling the general membership. It is not illegal, but it is shady as hell. So she is using her position to funnel HOA money to herself. Exactly. And there is more. See these fines collected. Last year, the HOA collected almost $15,000 in violation fines. Guess what happens to that money? It goes into the general fund. It is supposed to. But look at this payment right here. $5,000 to Hendricks Consulting for increased enforcement activities. She is literally incentivizing herself to fine people more. I felt sick. This was not about ice melt. This was not about rules. This was about money and power. We need to show this to everyone, I said. Already on it. I am putting together a presentation for the next meeting. That meeting happened the following Monday. The community center was so packed that people were standing in the hallway. Tom presented his findings, projecting the financial records on a screen. The room was silent as people absorbed what they were seeing. Patricia tried to defend herself, claiming the consulting fees were legitimate and approved, but it did not matter. The damage was done. By the end of the meeting, a vote was called to suspend Patricia and the board pending an investigation. It passed almost unanimously. The next day, Patricia sent out an email to all residents claiming she was the victim of a witch hunt, but most people were not buying it anymore. The investigation took about 3 weeks. It was conducted by residents with financial and legal backgrounds, and what they found was damning. While nothing Patricia had done was technically illegal, she had been using her position to enrich herself and had been aggressively fining residents to increase revenue. The ice melt fine was just one example in a pattern of overreach. Dozens of residents came forward with stories of unreasonable fines for minor infractions. One person had been fined for having a basketball hoop in their driveway, another for having a crack in their mailbox post, another for having a different shade of shutters than approved. It was a systematic abuse of power. In March, the annual HOA election happened. Patricia and the entire board were voted out. Tom Chen was elected president. Sarah Rodriguez became vice president. The new board's first action was to void my fines and issue a formal apology. Mr. Zimmerman, on behalf of the Meadowbrook Heights HOA, we apologize for the unreasonable treatment you received. Your fines are voided, and we encourage you to continue helping neighbors in whatever way you see fit. The room applauded. I just felt relieved, but the story did not end there. In April, a news reporter from the Columbus Dispatch contacted me. Someone had sent them the story, and they wanted to do an article about HOA overreach. I agreed to an interview. The article ran in May with the headline, "Columbus HOA President Fined Resident for Helping Neighbors During Winter Storm." It detailed everything, from the ice melt to the financial irregularities to the recall. The article went viral. Within days, it had been picked up by local TV stations, then regional news, then national news outlets. Suddenly, I was doing interviews about HOA reform and the problems with unaccountable community governance. Patricia Hendricks became a cautionary tale, a symbol of what happens when small power corrupts. But there was one more twist. In June, 2 months after the article ran, I got a call from a detective with the Columbus Police Department. "Mr. Zimmerman, this is Detective Andrea Foster. I am calling about Patricia Hendricks and the Meadowbrook Heights HOA. We have been investigating based on information that came to light after your situation was publicized." "Investigating what?" "We have reason to believe, Miss Hendricks was involved in financial fraud beyond what the neighborhood investigation uncovered. Specifically, there are missing HOA funds that do not appear in any official records. We would like to ask you some questions if you have time." I met with Detective Foster the next day at the police station. She was a woman in her early 40s, professional and direct. "We have been going through HOA records with a forensic accountant," she explained. "There is approximately $35,000 that was collected from residents over the past 3 years that never made it into official accounts. We believe Miss Hendricks was skimming money through fake vendor invoices and other methods." "That is embezzlement." "Yes, it is. And it is a felony." Over the next few months, I watched as the case built. Other residents were interviewed. Financial records were subpoenaed. Patricia hired a lawyer, but the evidence was damning. In September, Patricia Hendricks was arrested and charged with theft, forgery, and tampering with records. The arrest happened at her home early in the morning, and somehow a local news crew was there to film it. The image of Patricia being led to a police car in handcuffs became another viral moment. The woman who had tried to fine me for helping neighbors was now facing serious criminal charges. Her trial happened in December, nearly a year after that first orange violation notice had been stuck to my garage door. I attended the trial, sitting in the gallery with Tom Chen and several other neighbors. The evidence was overwhelming. Fake invoices for landscaping that never happened. Payments to shell companies that Patricia controlled. Inflated costs for services with the difference pocketed. The prosecution showed a pattern of theft spanning 3 years. Patricia took the stand in her own defense, claiming everything was legitimate business expenses and that she was being persecuted for being a strong leader. But the jury did not buy it. After 3 days of deliberation, they found her guilty on all counts. Sentencing happened in January, just over a year after this whole mess started. The judge sentenced Patricia Hendricks to 4 years in prison and ordered her to pay full restitution to the HOA. "Miss Hendricks, you were given a position of trust in your community," the judge said. "You abused that trust for personal gain. You created an environment of fear and intimidation among your neighbors while stealing from them. That kind of behavior cannot be tolerated." I watched Patricia break down in tears as she was led away. Part of me felt satisfaction. Part of me just felt sad that it had come to this. After the sentencing, reporters surrounded us outside the courthouse. I gave a brief statement. "I just wanted to help my neighbors with ice melt. I never imagined it would lead here. But I hope this sends a message that HOA boards need oversight and accountability. What happened in our neighborhood could happen anywhere." That evening, back in Meadowbrook Heights, the new HOA board held a community celebration at the community center. It was a thank you to everyone who had stood up against the overreach and helped reform the association. Tom Chen gave a speech. "A year ago, this neighborhood was divided and afraid. People were scared to speak up, scared to help each other, scared of their own HOA. But because one person stood up for what was right, because Jason Zimmerman refused to back down, we discovered the truth and took our community back." People applauded. I felt embarrassed but also proud. The new HOA board had implemented major reforms. All financial records were now published quarterly and available to any resident. Board meetings were recorded and posted online. Fines could only be issued after a warning and a chance to remedy. And most importantly, there was a resident oversight committee that could review and overturn board decisions. It was not perfect, but it was better. That winter, the second winter since this all began, Columbus got hit with another major snowstorm. And this time I was ready. I drove to Cincinnati again and bought ice melt in bulk. But this time, I was not alone. Tom Chen came with me. So did Sarah Rodriguez and Mr. Martin's son. We rented a truck and bought 100 bags. Back in Meadowbrook Heights, we set up a distribution point at the community center. We sold the ice melt at cost to anyone who needed it. No profits. Just neighbors helping neighbors. The new HOA board not only approved but helped organize it. As I was handing bags to residents, many of them thanked me. Not just for the ice melt, but for everything else. For standing up. For not backing down. For helping expose the corruption. Mrs. Martin came by with her husband. Despite being in their 80s, they both looked happier than I had ever seen them. "Jason, I wanted to thank you," she said. "Not just for the ice melt, but for giving us our neighborhood back. We were talking about moving because of how bad things had gotten. Now we can stay." That meant more to me than any news article or viral moment. That evening, after all the ice melt was distributed and the community center was locked up, I drove home through snow-covered streets. Amanda was waiting for me, warm food on the table. "How did it go?" she asked. "Good, really good. We helped probably 60 families today. Any HOA violations?" she asked with a smile. "Not a single one." We ate dinner together and I reflected on the past year. It had started with a simple act of kindness that turned into a nightmare. But that nightmare had exposed corruption, led to reform, and ultimately made our community stronger. Sometimes standing up for what is right costs you. The fines, the stress, the time, the energy. But sometimes it also reveals who people really are and what they are capable of when they work together. I never set out to be some kind of HOA reformer or neighborhood hero. I just wanted to help people not slip on ice. But in doing that simple thing, and in refusing to be bullied for it, I accidentally sparked a movement that changed our entire community. The ice melt itself was almost irrelevant in the end. It was never really about rock salt and bags in a garage. It was about power and accountability, and whether people would stand up when authority overreached. We stood up, and we won. A few months later, in early spring, I was working in my front yard planting flowers when a car pulled up. A woman I did not recognize got out and walked over. "Are you Jason Zimmerman?" "Yes. My name is Catherine Phillips. I live in the Riverside Oaks subdivision across town. We have been having problems with our HOA and someone told me to talk to you. They said you successfully fought back against HOA overreach." I smiled. I did not really fight back. I just refused to pay an unjust fine and people rallied behind me. "That is fighting back," she said. "Our HOA is fining people for ridiculous things, and we think the board might be misusing funds. Would you be willing to talk to us about what you went through and how you handled it?" I invited her to sit on my porch, and we talked for over an hour. I shared everything I had learned, all the mistakes I made, all the things that worked. I gave her Tom Chen's contact information and the name of the lawyer I had consulted with. As she was leaving, she thanked me profusely. "You have no idea how much this helps. We have felt so alone and powerless." "You are not alone," I told her, "and you are not powerless. Document everything. Rally your neighbors, and do not let bullies win just because they have a title." After she drove away, I went back to planting flowers. Amanda came out with 2 glasses of iced tea. "Another one?" she asked, having overheard the conversation. "Another one. You know, you are kind of becoming the HOA resistance leader of Columbus." "That is a terrible title," she laughed, "but accurate." Over the following months, I heard from 3 more neighborhoods dealing with similar issues. I helped where I could, sharing information and strategies. Some of their situations improved. Some did not. But at least people were trying. In September, nearly 2 years after the original ice melt incident, I was contacted by a state representative named Michael Chen, no relation to Tom. He was working on legislation to reform HOA governance in Ohio. "Mr. Zimmerman, your story helped shine a light on a major problem in our state. There are thousands of HOAs operating with minimal oversight, and residents have very few protections against abuse. I am working on a bill that would require more transparency and give homeowners more rights. Would you be willing to testify at a committee hearing?" I had never testified at anything in my life, but I agreed. The hearing happened in October at the Ohio State House in downtown Columbus. I sat at a table in front of a panel of state representatives and told my story. The ice melt, the fines, the investigation, the corruption, all of it. Other people testified too. Horror stories from across Ohio about HOA boards that had become petty dictatorships. People who had lost homes over minor violations. Families forced to spend thousands on legal fees to fight unjust fines. The representatives listened, asked questions, and seemed genuinely concerned. The bill passed committee and eventually made it to a full vote. It passed with bipartisan support and was signed into law in December. The new law required HOAs to publish financial records, limited their ability to impose fines without due process, and created an oversight mechanism through the state attorney general's office. It was not perfect, but it was progress. When I got the call that the bill had been signed, I sat down and felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. What started with ice melt in my garage had led to statewide reform. That Christmas, the Meadowbrook Heights HOA threw a holiday party at the community center. It was the first one in years, according to longtime residents. Under Patricia's reign, community events had been rare and usually felt more like enforcement meetings than celebrations. This party was different. There was food, music, kids running around, neighbors actually enjoying each other's company. Tom Chen gave a toast. 2 years ago, this neighborhood was broken. We were afraid of our own HOA. We did not trust each other. We did not help each other. But because of one person's stubborn refusal to accept injustice, everything changed. Jason, this is for you. Everyone raised their glasses. I felt embarrassed but deeply moved. Later that evening, as the party was winding down, Mr. Martin approached me. He was walking better these days, having gotten knee surgery that he had been putting off. Jason, I wanted to give you this. He handed me a small wrapped box. Mr. Martin, you did not have to get me anything. Open it. Inside was a small plaque that read, "To Jason Zimmerman, who reminded us that neighbors helping neighbors is always the right thing to do. Thank you." I did not know what to say. "You saved this neighborhood," Mr. Martin said quietly, "not just from Patricia and her corruption. You saved us from ourselves. We had stopped caring about each other. You reminded us why community matters." I hugged him, this 84-year-old man who had become a friend through all of this. As Amanda and I drove home that night, I thought about everything that had happened. The violation notice on my garage door felt like a lifetime ago. So much had changed. Our neighborhood, our state laws, my own understanding of what it means to stand up for what is right. "What are you thinking about?" Amanda asked. "Just that I am really glad I bought that ice melt." She laughed. Who would have thought rock salt would change so many lives? Not me. The next winter was the third since this all began. Columbus got hit with another big storm in February, and once again I organized bulk ice melt purchasing for the neighborhood. But this time, it was an official HOA-sponsored program. The board approved it, helped fund it, and even recruited volunteers to help distribute it. We helped over 200 families across Meadowbrook Heights and 2 neighboring subdivisions. Nobody got fined. Nobody got threatened. It was just neighbors helping neighbors, exactly as it should be. On a cold Saturday morning in February, as I was handing out bags of ice melt at the community center, a young couple approached me. They had just moved into the neighborhood the week before. "Are you Jason Zimmerman?" The woman asked. "I am. We heard about you when we were considering buying here. The realtor told us about what you did, fighting the HOA corruption. That is actually one of the reasons we decided to buy in this neighborhood. We wanted to live somewhere where people stand up for each other." I smiled. "Well, welcome to Meadowbrook Heights. Here is your ice melt." As they walked away with their bag, Tom Chen appeared beside me. "You know what is funny?" he said. "What?" Patricia Hendricks wanted to create a perfect neighborhood by enforcing every little rule and controlling everything. But she actually made it worse. You created a real community by just helping people. No rules, no control, just kindness. He was right. The neighborhood was better now than it had ever been. Property values had actually gone up, not because of strict enforcement, but because people wanted to live in a place where neighbors cared about each other. The lawsuit against Patricia for restitution was still ongoing. Her lawyer was trying to reduce the amount she owed, claiming she could not afford full repayment. But the HOA was not backing down. Every dollar she stole needed to be returned. I did not follow it too closely anymore. That chapter was over for me. What mattered now was moving forward. Building the kind of community we actually wanted to live in. Helping each other. Being good neighbors. As the winter wound down and spring approached, I started thinking about next winter. Maybe we would expand the ice melt program to more neighborhoods. Maybe we would organize other bulk buying for things people needed. There were possibilities, but for now, I was content. My garage no longer had stacks of ice melt bags, which was fine. The last of it had been distributed the week before. My home was peaceful. My neighborhood was healthy. And I had learned more about community, justice, and standing up for what is right than I ever expected to learn from a simple act of helping neighbors. Sometimes the smallest actions have the biggest consequences. Sometimes refusing to back down changes everything. And sometimes ice melt is about a lot more than just preventing people from slipping on ice. It is about what kind of community we want to be, what kind of neighbors we want to be, what kind of people we want to be. And in Meadowbrook Heights in Columbus, Ohio, we had answered those questions clearly. We wanted to be the kind of people who helped each other, who stood up against injustice, who did not let bullies win just because they had authority. That might seem like a small thing, but it is everything. As spring fully arrived and the last of the snow melted away, I planted a garden in my front yard. Tomatoes, peppers, herbs, flowers. Neighbors stopped by to chat as I worked, asking about what I was planting, sharing their own garden plans. Mrs. Martin brought me seeds from her garden. These are heirloom tomatoes. My mother gave them to me 50 years ago. I save seeds every year. I thought you might like some. I planted them in a place of honor, right where I could see them from my kitchen window. That summer, those tomatoes grew tall and produced more fruit than Amanda and I could eat. So I started leaving baskets of tomatoes on neighbors' porches with little notes attached. No HOA violations this time. Just vegetables and kindness. One evening in July, I was watering my garden when Patricia Hendricks drove past my house. She had been released on bail pending appeal, though her conviction seemed solid. Our eyes met for just a moment. I saw anger there and bitterness, and something that might have been regret. I just nodded and went back to watering my tomatoes. Whatever demons she was fighting, whatever led her down the path of corruption and control, that was for her to deal with. My part in her story was over. My story continued. Every day in small ways, trying to be a good neighbor. Trying to build community. Trying to make my little corner of the world a bit better. It turned out that was the most revolutionary thing I could do. Not fighting or protesting or making grand gestures. Just consistently, persistently being kind and standing up for what is right. The ice melt incident taught me that, and I would never forget it. Years from now, when people ask me about the time I fought my HOA, I will tell them it was never really a fight. It was just a refusal to accept that helping people was wrong. And sometimes, refusing to accept wrong is all it takes to change everything.